Future Games, A Magical Kahuna Dream by Spirit, released January 1977. In 1975, Spirit managed to secure a 4-album deal with Mercury Records on the strength of some demos they made, which would eventually become their first album for Mercury, Spirit of 76. The band back then pretty much consisted of just Randy California and Ed Cassidy, and various satellite musicians, mainly bassist, though former band members Jay Ferguson, Mark Andes and John Locke would turn up on record or in live performances from time to time. In concert, Spirit were an exceptional band, and they had a big following. But the albums leading up to Future Games, Spirit of 76, Son of Spirit and Farther Along, hadn't sold that well, and when the time came round to record the 4th album, it wasn't looking too great for the band to be offered another contract. Randy California decided that what he was going to do was just go in the studio and make his record. Screw the record company, I'm just going in that studio and make a record that I like, and while I do it, I'm going to have some fun. The result was Future Games. Listening to it now in 2020, it still sounds way ahead of its time. It really does sound like some sort of magical dream, albeit a very psychedelic one. Randy blended in snippets of old TV shows and movies with some of the best pop rock you will ever hear. The album is credited to Spirit, but is in truth a Randy California solo record, with Randy playing most of the instruments with a little help from friends. It's just an amazing record, and it's one of my all-time favourites. Just before I start talking about the music, just a quick point about the cover. It is in fact Randy poking fun at Ted Nugent, standing there all macho, bare-chested, arms folded, showing off his muscles. It's just a little dig at Ted. Ted and Randy, it might be fair to say, didn't really get on that well. The album kicks off with a song from an Hawaiian band called Andy Iona and the Islanders, and their song Let's Go for Broke from 1934. What else? That merges into CB talk, and we have two truckers talking on the CB radio. One's called Salty Dog, and he's got something he wants you all to hear. It's the new Spirit album called Kahuna Dream. A disembodied voice rises from the mix and informs us that everything is contained here. And as that comes to a close, we drift into the first track, The Stars Are Love. A swirling, beautiful mix of bass, synth, crashing cymbals, and some spaced out electric lead guitar. Bad luck and trouble will find you. I just came here to remind you that the stars are love. Back then, aliens, UFOs were all the rage. And just around the corner the very next year we had those Hollywood blockbusters, Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Star Wars. But it seemed, back then in the late 70s, it seemed like everybody was looking at the stars. As the track begins to fade, California sings a few lines from his classic song, Nature's Way. It's nature's way of telling you something's wrong. It's nature's way of telling you in a song. Throughout the album, California uses those clips of dialogue to create strange and odd counterpoints to the music. They will just bubble up out of the mix and then just disappear. Track 2, Kahuna Dream, is a drifting, languid gem of a song, accompanied by some incredible guitar playing from Randy California. Throw in acoustic guitar, drum machine, Native American Indian chanting, and great bass, courtesy Mark Andes. It's just beautiful. You give me the key, I open the door. Love is all, there is no more. Track 3, Buried in My Brain. This is the first of 2 tracks which Randy wrote with Kim Fowley. Fowley, for those who don't know him, was a record producer, singer, songwriter and musician, probably best known for a string of novelty hits in the 60s. He's described as a shadowy cult figure who lived his life, let's say, well outside of the mainstream. How he teamed up with Randy California, I have no idea. I'm guessing that they met in an LA club one night and the meeting was fruitful. Used to be an animal, roam the western plains. Now I live inside myself, buried in my brain. The food you used to eat doesn't taste the same, kind of space you can't control. Losing your grip on pain, living in a soundless dream. This could have been where the album starts to take a slightly darker turn, but halfway through the song, California playfully tells us that his reality is slipping, and it's starting to carry on. Ed Cassidy's distinctive drumming and Randy's superb guitar playing are all over this track. On the demo of this song, however, they had an extra guitar track which basically had California soloing throughout the whole song, but for some reason that was removed. More voices bubble out from the mix. Why don't you confess now? You're mad. Mad? No. They found us, just like I planned. Bionic Unit definitely has a nod or two to Mr. Zappa. I went up your channels with your science fiction screens. You've got to maintain your maintenance with your electronic dreams. We're communicators with a cybernetic style. We're too young to die with our phasers set on smile. California, with his best Zappa impersonation, informs us that citizens looking for the source of life could mean we have broken through the Romulan cloaking device. This song is the first reference to Star Trek on the album. The rest of the record is full of snippets from the TV show, especially from the last ever episode, Turnabout Intruder. There was a CD edition of this album, released I think 1994, 1995 in the UK, where you could actually hear the whole of that episode, Turnabout Intruder, playing in the background. The best way I can describe this track is if Kirk and the crew visited some alien bar in some distant galaxy and there was a band playing, they would sound something like this. Next up, we get a very, very brief snippet, 14 seconds, of So Happy Now. When I first heard this album, because we only get the intro, and this used to frustrate the hell out of me. How did the rest of the song go? What would it sound like? I just knew it was going to be absolutely brilliant. Many years later, I was gifted the demos for this album by Randy California's estate and got to hear the whole version for the first time, and I was right. It's a wonderful jazzy pop song with a beautiful melody. Elsewhere in California at the same time, Stevie Guitar Miller was mining the same rich pop rock vein and was selling shed loads of albums. If you want to hear the full version of So Happy Now, it was finally released on Salvation, Spirit of 74, as was a demo version, The Stars Are Love. For the next track, Randy California dons his Bob Dylan / Jimi Hendrix hat for a stellar version of All Along the Watchtower. It's the song Jim, but not as we know it. Introduced by a snippet from the old Tarzan TV series, California takes his guitar and makes it bleed all over this track. If Jimmy was looking down when Randy made this track, I'm sure he was very, very proud. Well, at least we know where he is and what he's up to. And as the two riders begin to approach on waves of synth and guitar, and the wind begins to howl from speaker to speaker, the track ends in a maelstrom of bass, acoustic guitar, and beautiful lead guitar lines. Captain Kirk then tells us he's from the Federation, and we drift into the classic Would You Believe? This is an absolute gem of a pop song, and if Brian Wilson had recorded this, everyone would be going mental about it. California's slightly echoed vocals, synthesizer, drums, and some more zonked out lead guitar. The song swirls and dances, and you could imagine that if you looked outside your window on a clear night, you could see the starships on the crown. And into a slight snippet of The Journey of Nomad, which ends the first side. Riding on a midnight train, passengers have no words. Their cold, heartless stares into the distance can only mean they know their fate. They know that it's too late. Because no one saw the awesome machine built to destroy. Their ideas of perfection didn't include you and me. So we died that morning, and the next day we bought Volkswagens. I'll leave that up to your interpretation. It's a stark, sombre moment on an otherwise fun album. This leads us in to Jack Bond Speaks. Jack Bond was a character, if I remember rightly, a sort of stone prophet who appeared on Spirit of 76. His echoed, almost unintelligible voice fits perfectly here. The best way to describe it is if aliens were trying to contact us through the vastness of space. I can well imagine this is how it would sound. But Jack does lead us to the edge of tomorrow. Star Trek Dreaming is introduced by Kirk and the crew, setting speed at warp factor 8. And we are led into one of the most zany, spaced out instrumentals of all time. All the instruments are played by Randy California, drums with some beautiful cymbal splashes, funky bass line, and the only way I can describe it is some laughing lead guitar lines. Over to Captain Kirk. I'm not just requesting an explanation, mister, I'm demanding one. China Doll drifts in on a wave of slide guitar as California somehow marries together verses about a relationship with a Chinese woman to a dig at world leaders. This is the Randy California universe, and anything is possible. And back to Star Trek. I'm asking you, Jim, to report for a medical examination. What do you base that on? Development of erratic mental attitudes since returning from that planet. And here comes Gorn Attack. Waves of synth, staccato piano chords, and an incredible bass line. California layers on top some great rhythm guitar playing. The piece is chopped up and appears, I think, in about 3 or 4 versions throughout the album. But if you want space rock, this is it. It's very, very Pink Floyd. It's such a shame that this was never played live. It would have been an absolute showstopper. Next up, Detroit City. This is a slow, slinky blues with yet another great bass line and some shuffling drums. City, with a suitcase in my hand. Gonna play with a girl called Angel to prove I was a man. So I talked among the people and I walked among the crowd. It was a good feeling, and I had to say out loud, it's gonna be alright, gonna love you tonight in Detroit City. It's yet another beautiful pop rock song. Kermit the Frog, who else, makes an appearance and introduces the Freak Out Frog, which consists of the lines, come and do the Freak Out Frog, watch him hopping on a log. Doesn't sound like much, but it contains some liquid guitar lines and great drumming, and some of the most beautiful 12-string guitar you will ever hear. And I absolutely love it. Monkey See, Monkey Do uses the same instrumental track as Star Trek Dreaming, but this is a completely different song. It's such a shame that the whole version wasn't used here, because it's another classic pop song. Randy duetting with a lady called Terry Anderson. Randy California was an amazing guitarist, probably the best I've ever seen. He could play anything, jazz, rock, blues, classical, country, but he could also write wonderful songs with great melodies. If you want to have a listen to a shining example of California writing pop rock songs outside of this, go and listen to the Euro-American years, because that contains dozens and dozens of just classic pop rock songs that Randy never got a chance to properly develop. As Monkey See, Monkey Do finishes, we get another section of Gorn Attack, but this time Randy adding some slide guitar to the mix. What did the big fella say to the little fella? And we head back to the journey of Nomad. This time California adds another verse. This one's about Japan and their part in the Second World War. Back in 1977, Japanese companies were pretty much taking over the USA market. But do we end on a downer? No. Here comes Bud Abbott and Lou Costello, and Bud telling Lou, get to bed, get with it, no more of this nonsense. And back come Andy Iona and the Islanders for one final appearance, and we drift off into that Hawaiian sunset. As much as I love this album, it could have been so much more. California had dozens and dozens of great songs written and recorded, which would have made this album even better. I hope one day they release the demos and we get to hear the vast swathes of material that Randy had written around this time. There's a few songs out there on Salvation, Spirit of 74, and also Rock and Roll Planet. Now, the last thing I'll say about this album is when a friend of mine was reviewing it in 1977, he said that it's like an oral blank check. Every time you hear it, you hear different things. And even today, in 2020, I can hear different things. I can hear new things in it, things I haven't picked up before. It's an immense album. And if you've got the time, please take a listen to it. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video.